morning, everybody. It's September 17th, and we are kicking off the Technical Advisory Committee meeting to take a look at changes to the administrative rules. I will start the slide deck. All right, everybody should be able to see that slide deck now.
Yep.
All right, good. So pretty much the same running agenda that we've been working on for the past couple of months. We'll do the ground rules for the public. We'll do resources. We'll talk about the a new item. We had a meeting with the Department of Regulatory Agencies on plumbing and their plumbing and electrical notice that's up on their website. Want to share that with everybody. Then we'll dive into rulemaking one. We've had a few more tweaks to the language. We'll talk about the stakeholder meeting that we also held on rulemaking one. And then we'll get into rulemaking two and next steps. So if there are public members here, we do appreciate you and be participating in this process. It's a very important process for our administrative rulemaking and implementation of Senate Bill 25-002. We recommend typing your questions into the chat or virtually raising your hand if you'd like to speak. Priority will be given to the Technical Advisory Committee members if we're short on time, but we do encourage comments to also be emailed to myself at the email sam.albrecht@state.co.us. The resources for those new members that are joining, public members that are joining, these are hot links on the slide deck, which will be posted to the website. And it's the same resources that you will also see on the previous presentations. Hot link to the 25-002, the regional building codes for factory built structures. We reference the statutes that are our guiding statutes is 2432, 3301 to 3329, and then the administrative rules as they exist today, and then the building codes and standards website and the Technical Advisory Committee website. So the first thing on the agenda was the implementation. This is on the Department of Regulatory Agencies website, their plumbing and electrical notice regarding Senate Bill 25-002 on their 2025 legislative update page. It basically provides a notification to electrical and plumbing boards and electrical and plumbing members on what's going on with 25-002. We had a small meeting with Dora to kind of talk about next steps. I think we are going to be invited to their next town hall to talk about exactly if there's any questions from their stakeholder groups regarding the implementation of that. Donnie is working on some more just documentation to be able to hand out and maybe even put up on their website, showing some visual aids with respect to the connections for electrical and plumbing. Any questions on this? Anybody want to have any discussion on this?
To clarify, Sam, this is to make clear where our jurisdiction ends and then the local or DORA's jurisdiction picks up and carries on, correct?
Yes, sir. That's it. Okay. We are, as part of our outreach, also going to set up meetings with Colorado Fire Prevention and Control to talk about the 002 language that clarifies some of the responsibilities for fire prevention and control on modular factory built structures also. That one will be set up in October sometime. Tim?
Yeah, thank you. I've got a question. I know I've looked at this before on that slide deck where it talks about gas piping needs to be done by a qualified gas piping installer. And I have no idea what that means from a regulatory standpoint, since the state of Colorado plumbing board does not oversee gas. So there's no certification. So from a standpoint of how you would be enforcing that.
Right. Donnie, did you have any further information on that? We did talk a little bit about gas on that meeting, but I can't
Yeah.
seem to.
I think Sam, I think the best person to probably respond to that is John McGee. That was actually language that Dora asked to be included in the statute. John, are you able to address how that actually would work?
Well, I don't know if we figured that out totally, right, Mo? Just because you know, any of the gas providers require a sign off on the deal, so I'm not sure exactly how we decided we were going to do that. Did we?
I don't know. I guess that will require further discussion, Tim, between us and Dora to get that.
Yeah, we don't require licensing, of
Correct.
course, you know, but the fuel gas code with the Colorado, you know, with the plumbing board sets the fuel gas code, but that's not necessarily if you're doing the IRC. You have Chapter 24 that you know, does the fuel gas for residential for sure, but it doesn't cover the commercial stuff.
Yeah, do you know why, John, though, that Dora asked for that language to be included specifically?
Asked for what now, Mo?
For that language to be included in the bill? Do you know why it asked for language?
I don't think Dora asked for that. We didn't get we didn't have any input into it at all.
No, you guys did. There was a conversation with Dora. That language came from Dora, I'm pretty sure. I'll do some research and I'll get back to you guys.
Yeah.
I don't think it came from you, but I think pretty sure it came from Dora. But I'll find out.
It could have from our upper management, yeah, but we weren't really consulted on any of that type of stuff.
Okay, yeah, I'll find out.
Yeah, let me know, and we can get together and talk about that when you find out.
Or it could have been actually from the no, I think about it. It might not have been Dora for Dora. It might have been actually the trades groups. I'll find out.
All right, so we'll report back more on that at the next TAC meeting, which is October 8th. Any other questions or discussions on that? Tim, thanks for bringing that up. Okay. Just to remind everybody of our Rulemaking 1 schedule, we had our September 11th stakeholder meeting. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Today's the 17th. September 30th, we're going to be filing the final notice of proposed rules with the Secretary of State. And then November 4th will be that public hearing on the recommended changes, recommended rules, and potential adoption by the State Housing Board. That will be a virtual meeting. And then December 10th, those rules will be published in Colorado Register, and December 30th, they'll take effect. If you remember what Rulemaking 1 is primarily made up of now is the updated rules for registered and certified business entity installers. We used the opportunity as we looked at Chapter 6 to add some additional language regarding installers that can't complete installations. We clarified the expiration of insurance, financial surety, and registration dates. We also took the opportunity to amend the IBC for single exits in certain multifamily structures, and for installer certifications for Class IBC multifamily structures, we clarified, we made some modifications to that. And then we talked again about business entities that have qualified certified installers in Rule 612 and its sub rules. So the short summary of Rulemaking 1, which the stakeholder meeting to the public. We will get that posted on the website very soon. There was no administrative rules related issues raised. We sent an email out to about 4,000 or 5,000 people. We had 16 public attendees. And so again, no specific discussion on the rules. There was some general discussions since they had us on the line to talk about some of our turnaround times, some of the permitting delays that they're seeing with the local building departments, and whether or not there was a contact list for all local jurisdictions. So we addressed those issues in the meeting, but again, they were not related to the administrative rules. So then I want to go through again and just real quickly before we get into Rulemaking 2, we've got some further slides to go through on that we will hope generate some good discussion on regional codes. But we want to talk a little bit about some of the final changes to the draft language before we file on September 30th. Again, if anybody has anybody, whether they're TAC members or members of the public, has any comments, please send those to me. There will be another opportunity to get those comments into the public record for the State Housing Board meeting. So we took out the definition of 119 that we've been working with because that is already defined in statute. So we took that out. And the language in 1.6, this slide needs to be changed since we deleted 1.19. The last part of this sentence will that's in red on 1.6 changes to Rule 1.10 period. So that didn't get caught when we looked at the slide deck, so we will take that out. But that ties down to this rule and this definition, and we took that out. Here's where we talk about the number of exit access doorways, that amendment to the IBC. We added 10.6.1. This hasn't changed in a while, so everybody has already seen that. Any discussion on that one? So we added a clarification on the fees for in Chapter 3 of the rules for the installer individual business. We left it at $250 because statute says it is $250 for installers. What we added was that the initial registration fee is $250 for a business entity. Annual renewal fee will be $250, just like it will be for individual installers. And then if a business entity adds an individual during the annual cycle, that there'll be a processing fee of $100. I know RMHA weighed back in on that they didn't have a problem with that. Matt, I'm not sure if you've had a chance to weigh in on that yet, but if you have any concerns with that, let us know. I know we talked about this when we were first looking at this several months back, and there didn't seem to be a problem with that. One thing that we added for clarification is that the addition of a qualified individual will not change the renewal cycle of that business entity installer registration. So if they're get registered, 6 months later they add another installer, that fee will be $100 to add that installer, but in 6 months they've got to renew the business entity registration. Does that make sense to everybody? Donnie?
Yeah, just real quick, I think what we could probably do is if they're registering a new person at the end of their cycle, we can probably just go with the $250. So we're not charging a $100 fee and then charging a $250 fee to register the new business. So maybe we can clarify that. Or
yeah, Donnie, that's the way I considered it too. If they're going to renew, they have to provide the list of individuals that are qualified and their educational updates. And all their new equipment, not new financial documents. So that would just be part of the renewal process. It's not going to be 250 plus 100 or 200 or 300. It's going to just be 250. Any questions on that? Dean?
Yeah, I had a question. Not so much on this particular section, but one thing jumped out at me, and apologies if this has been fully vetted with the folks who are actually, doing that business, then you can ignore this comment. But I read that it was the qualification involved 18-month time window to have set 2 multifamily buildings in the course of that time frame. If I read that correctly, that just seemed like quite a hurdle. Oh, and by the way, those buildings had to be, permitted in Colorado. So like if you're a set guy and you're traveling all over the country, I just didn't know what the realities are of setting 2 multifamily buildings in the state of Colorado within an 18-month time period. That I don't know that we have that many projects to qualify that many people.
Dean, that's a good point. We did talk about this a little bit at the last meeting, I think, and we have run it by Matt Mitchell and RMHA, and we've gone back and forth. We want to be, Matt, I don't know if you were, and I don't know if Tawny's on, if you guys want to jump in and comment, but we are, let me find that slide and I'll bring that up right now. So Dean, I think this
is Nate. Isn't there also a sidestep to that where if you have your contractor A license? So
Just real quick, the requirement you're talking about, Dean, is for certification, not registration.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's a separate process. But
sure, but the same applies, right? To be initially certified, you'd have to jump through that hoop, right? Unless what Nate just mentioned was the alternative.
No. So there's installer registration requirements that you can use. I think your experience could be, I think it's A through H or something like that. So there's different ways you can qualify. And one of them is experience, but you don't have to have those hours of installation experience. You can qualify with I think a contractor's A's license, or I think another one is a B, depending on whether or not it's a high rise or low rise. But those requirements are specific to multifamily installer registration requirements. And then we also have registration requirements that are specific to single family dwellings for like, your typical single family dwelling, IRC building, duplex or townhouse that's built under the IB or IRC. So they're 2 separate requirements, and this one that's on the slide right now is specific to multifamily certification for installers.
And Dean, certification is you're allowed to, lack of a better way to say it, is you're allowed to do your own installation inspections as you're installing. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't mean that you can't be registered as a licensed installer for a multifamily. It just means that to be certified, you have to clear these experience hurdles.
Gotcha. Okay. No, thank you for the clarification.
Tawny, you've got your hand up.
Yes, thanks, Sam. Yeah, so Dean, we discussed it. Uh-oh. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry. So Dean, we discussed it, and Matt seems completely fine with that 2 building requirement, because it does allow for 18 months to complete those projects. So he didn't seem to be concerned with that time frame. And it also allowed for a certain number of units, like floors, like boxes, so that you don't have to complete huge structures to be recognized as completing those projects.
Okay,
right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tawny. Donnie?
Yeah, I just want to, I guess, kind of jump into why we went with 15 and 2. So the idea was we didn't want to have too hard of a qualification to get some installers who may not be doing large multifamily projects. They might be doing townhouse projects. And as you know, from the multifamily definition, townhouse is considered multifamily per our definition. And so if they're doing smaller projects, maybe they're doing like 3 buildings, or let's say that they did, let's say that they had 5 3-building townhouse projects that they got going on. They would still need to install those structures to meet the 15 minimum multifamily dwelling units, but also couldn't do less than 2. But if they did a larger project where like, hey, I can't get 2 multifamily projects done, within a certain time period, as long as they were able to get 15 multifamily dwelling units installed and can't be less than 2 multifamily buildings, then they would still be able to qualify for certification. So we try to reduce the amount, but also keep a consistent requirement across the board for all the installers. Because I think when we're trying to work through the numbers, at one point, you're almost you would have a less stringent requirement to do multifamily installations than single family dwelling installations. And it wouldn't make sense to do it that way, right? Because, it's not necessarily easier to install these units, but at the same time, we wouldn't want to make the requirement less stringent than what the single family dwelling requirement was at. So we just figured, I think on the, if I remember correctly, the single family was 5 buildings total for your certification. So if you're doing 5 buildings, and we just figured if you're doing 3 units, because the multifamily is 3 or more units, then you should still be able to qualify for certification through the multifamily, because it'll be 5 buildings, or it'd be equivalent to like 5 buildings with 3 units, right? Because those would be multifamily installations. So that's how we came up with the 15 number. And the 2 was just saying, we wouldn't want somebody to become certified just by installing 1 building, right? There should be at least a minimum of 2 buildings that are inspected for the certification itself. Does that help out?
Thank you, Donnie. Dean, your hand is still up. You may be on by phone. Did you want something?
Sorry,
else?
I'll put that down.
Okay, not a problem. All right, any other discussion on that? Otherwise, I'll back up to the where we were in the slide deck. Dean, thanks for bringing that up. All right, so we talked about the fee for business entities and the additional individuals that will be added to business entity installer registration. And then this one has not changed. This is actually we tweaked. No, I think this is the same. We toyed around with tweaking some of this language, but this covers when an installer can't complete an installation. That we need notified by the installer or an installer's representative. Yes, that's the language that did change. Must notify the division within 5 business days of a new qualified installer. And then 610 talks about registration of business entities. And so 610.2 is where we start talking about that. And then 610.1 and 610.2 talk about the process for registration. We clarify that direct on-site supervision reference back to Rule 110, and that everybody will need an application from that business entity that's going to be doing installations. And then we clarify that the some of the financial documents that we want to make sure everything includes the business name for the individual registering. And then this is still for business entity installer registration. Just clarification on what we need to make sure that the business accounts match the documentation in 610.2.3. We talk about business owners or the representatives and must notify if a registered employee has been terminated or is no longer with the business, or if the business ceases to exist. Then we also looked at the installer will be marked inactive when any item in 610.2.2 expires or the application to renew has not been submitted. And then we'd look at the educational requirements in 610.2.6. And then 610.2.7, the registered business entity must assign a qualified individual's name to be included on the installation authorization. If a business entity assigns a new qualified individual to an installation, then they must notify the Division of Housing within 5 business days. And then finally, 610.3 and 610.3.1, we talk about the expiration of the any of the documentation. At that point, installations need to stop until we have a renewal application that's been submitted to the division. And we took out the recommendation, rules are rules, and recommendations. We'll provide that in the registration package, that it's recommended that the applicant have the letter of credit and all the dates line up. But we did take it out of the red line on the draft rules, so we're deleting that now. Any question on the registration of business entity installers? Okay. And then this slide we just talked about. This is the certification for IBC, multifamily structures. And then 613.2 also talks about certification of a business entity. A business entity will be certified when all installers are certified. And then we talk about some of the variations of that. If a new installer comes in, the business entity will continue to be certified until that person and that the new installer has 18 months to become certified. And that while that person is working for a certified business entity installer, and they're a registered installer, that their units will have to be inspected until that individual is certified. That's 613.2.2. All right, any question on the red line for the rules? Now, I reserve the right to have a final go through and change a word here or there, but if there's any content changes, I'll notify the TAC before we file with the Secretary of State. But we are darn close to final. Mo?
Yeah, Sam, I've got some minor edits for you that I sent to you earlier this morning. It's not
Good.
It's not anything substantive. It doesn't change any intent, etc. Just language changes to be consistent with how we actually write the rules in the rest of the document, just to be consistent.
Thank you, Mo. Mo's hidden talent is technical changes to the rules. And we appreciate the time he gives us to do that. So I'll take a look at that before we.
Sam, how I would describe that actually is a tweaker in chief. I just enjoy tweaking.
Tweaker in chief. I like that. I like that. I'll get you a new name tag. But no, I do appreciate it. And we've looked at these things and it doesn't matter how many times, we always find something slightly that could be written better. So Mo, I appreciate your time on these. I know you're a busy man. Any other questions on the red line and the rules before we jump into the really fun stuff on the Rulemaking 2? All right. Thanks, everybody. So Rulemaking 2 schedule, again, this is with an effective date of June 30th. And we'll talk a little bit. This slide has not changed. We have to have this red line version of the rules again done by about March 31st, because that's when we have to file them with the Secretary of State in order to get that June 30th effective date. So the last time the TAC will look at them, just like we're looking at rulemaking 1 now, will be March 18th. And we'll have stakeholder meetings before that too. That's the only thing that's not on that is some proposed stakeholder meetings. And we know rulemaking 2 is a little more intense, so we are expecting to have at least 2, if not 3 stakeholder meetings for the public. And then May 5th will be the official public hearing date. So rulemaking 2 content, that's not changed. It'll be the regions and the design criteria and what's going to work there. We're going to dive down into local government inspections also. The process for third-party plan approval for manufacturers. We're going to get that worked out. We're also going to look, there is an allowance for DOH to use a third party for final plan reviewer approval in that. We're going to take a look at that real close. And then the audit process for plan approvals, inspections, seller contracts, and verification of down payment protection, and how we implement that audit process and make it public so everybody knows what's going on. We're going to look at responsible parties and then the contractor registration and education and review accessibility if needed. Mo?
Hey, Sam, we had discussed the other day the potential of speeding up the third-party plan approval requirements and implementation and not doing it with everything else, which we're shooting to do effective by June 30th, July 1st. Did you give that further thought, or are you still thinking about that? Basically,
We're still thinking of that on that, Mo. But yeah, there is a potential for a rulemaking 1.5 to do the third party stuff. I want to look at all the ramifications of that and capacity, and I want to loop back, Mo, with you and Megan and Donnie one more time before we see to do that. But it might make sense to not only do that, but some of the other stuff that we could do that isn't tied to that June 30th date in another rulemaking, because I love to do rulemakings. So the more rulemakings we can do, the better. Just kidding on the last line. But yeah, let's circle back. What I'd hope
just to clarify, all these items are tied to the June 30th date, but it does, the way the statute reads is, if memory serves me right, it's on or before June 30th. So
Yeah.
any of these things can be done sooner. It's
Right.
just they were all kind of lumped in together as being potentially effective as late as June 30th, right? Where the installer requirements actually went into effect when the bill got signed into law, right? So it made sense to get that done sooner rather than later. The other stuff can wait, but we also have the opportunity to carve out things that we think might make more sense to have effective in clarifying rules sooner rather than later, like third-party plan reviews.
Yeah, and there's 2 parts to that, right? Well, that one is the process for third-party plan approval for manufacturers. The other is the allowance for DOH to use a third party for final plan review and approval. So that allowance for DOH to use a third-party plan for final review or approval, I want to look at both together or separate if it makes more sense in order to meet our target deadlines on plan reviews.
I think it would make sense to do them together, whether we do it sooner or we do them later. Those two concepts should be done together.
I agree. The same process, more or less. So
Exactly.
Okay. Yep. And so we'll be talking that. I'll roll out more. What I want is put together a potential timeline, potential impacts to the department, and what might be realistic to do. We'll bring that up again at the October 8th meeting. All right, so here's where we're gonna dive into some more discussion on the regional codes, because that's the long point that I think we're all working to, but based on the discussion we just had, if we can do some of these things earlier in another rulemaking, we're happy to do that. And if we can, now that we've got the business entity installer thing wrapped up, we may have a little more capacity to do some of these things. I do want to jump ahead to another slide, and that is the code consulting contractor. We got, as I mentioned, we have put out for a documented quote. We received 3 bids on that. We shared that information widely. We reviewed 3 bids, and we have selected Schumes Coda Associates as the preferred contractor. We're working through the language right now to get them on contract. And the other 2 bidders were notified also. So we got really 3 quality proposals that we went through. Schumes Coda was the selected bidder. So we hope to have them on by that October 8th meeting. So that will, and then even before that, we'll have them on contract and give them all the background that is necessary to make that October 8th meeting productive as we start talking about the regional codes. Any questions on that? Okay, let me go back. I'm going to ask Donnie to help walk through some of these slides. As we looked at, this is kind of a continuation of the discussion that we had last meeting, and we had some really good juices flowing. Why do I have my own hand up? I don't know how I did that. I apologize, guys.
Sam, do you have a question for us?
I don't know what I did.
Oh, it's better than me. I still can't figure out how to raise my hand. So
Yeah, Nate, it must be infective.
I was just thinking that maybe the AI seen your hand raise up, and so it raised a hand for you on the.
Oh, I've got so many screens open here, guys. If one of my co-hosts can take my hand down, that'd be great.
I think it has something to do with you wanting to continue to do so many rulemaking sessions.
Yeah, maybe that was it. So this is the continuation of the discussion we had last week. We had some really good discussion. We talked about maybe taking the climate zones as the base. We're going to look at a couple more options. Donnie has done some work with mapping and heat maps, and this is not even a proposal. This is just for discussion again as we look forward to bringing on that code consultant to help us work through these things. But let me just go and kind of talk about what the non-map based solution provides. And that is that we would still need to look up site-specific requirements. We couldn't just put up one map that has all the different zones on there. Another challenge would be we've not worked out sprinklers, structure hardening, and radon yet. That's another discussion that we'll wait for the contractor to help with. And then the opportunities is that this might actually be better from a cost of manufacturing process perspective with respect to where the breakpoints are and the cost of the structures going into these regional zones. And it may be better for locations where you have multiple wind or snow load conditions in a local jurisdiction already, such as Denver, Boulder, Pikes Peak Regional Building Authority. They have, because they cover so much different altitude and snow load and wind load, some of those front range communities, it would be hard to build a single. This might provide more flexibility for them, for the manufacturers to have two sets of approved plans for, you know, one side of I-25 in Denver and the other side of I-25 in Denver. But again, things we just need to consider moving forward. With that, as you know, we are looking at wind shear, snow load, wildfire risk, thermal zone, radon mitigation, and fire sprinklers. Donnie, I'm going to advance slides for you as you work through some of this stuff.
Okay, thank you. Can you go back to that previous slide real quick?
Bring up what?
The previous slide. I just wanted to add to that. One of the reasons why we added this here is I think the last few TAC meetings, there's been a little confusion on what we're actually considering as part of the regional building codes when we're developing this. And we're not necessarily taking all of the locals design criteria in the sense of their building codes that they've amended. We're still adopting our own codes, and we make our own amendments to our own codes. But these are the things that we're taking into consideration from the locals: the wind shear, snow loads, wildfire, thermal zone, radon, and automatic fire suppression systems, right? So we do have to take those into consideration when we're developing the regional building codes, but we're not taking into consideration their actual adopted codes and their amendments that they've made to their codes. So we're only, these bullets that are right here are what we're focusing on, and making sure that when we create these regional building codes, that they align with these specific requirements at the locals, right? I think the idea is that our factory built products are meeting or exceeding the local requirements in the sense of design. So wherever these go, they should be consistent with the site built construction that's there at the site location. Okay. And so can you go to the next slide? So with that being said, what I did here, and again, these aren't, this is not how I think this should be done. This is more just like, hey, this is what I put together to see how it might work. And maybe if it sticks, great. If not, if it needs some modifications or just need a totally new idea, that's fine too. I just wanted to show this to you, at least some of the work that we've done to try to see what we can do to get regional building codes to work, I guess. So when you look at my table here, you'll see that I broke down by the zones, specifically for snow and wind, and then there's also zones for climate zone. And so just real quick on the climate zone portion, based on some conversations that we had in previous discussions with TAC, I think the idea of having one climate zone might not necessarily work for the entire state. So I just broke it down into 4, just in case there are some requirements that might be specific to the climate zone. I think there's still some room in there that we can maybe do 1, possibly 2 climate zones to make it a little bit easier. The requirements are very similar in the sense of the thermal requirements, but also have to take into consideration, I believe Don had mentioned that there was some venting requirements that might be different in climate zone 7 versus 5, 4, 5, and 6. So we just have to do a little more digging on that end. But I split up the climate zones into four zones. And then also the snow zones and the wind zones into 5 zones. So zone 1, it'd be like the minimum requirement. And currently our rules state that 30 pound snow load for the roof is the minimum. But with the creation of the regional building codes, we can move that around so that we can try to cover as much area as possible for that zone, right? And then zone 2 is 50 pound roof, 65 roof, and 95 for 3 and 4. And then zone 5 is site specific. So the site specific is not only there because we limit zone 4 up to 95 pounds per square foot. But it's also there to give manufacturers the ability to build a site-specific home if their model is not to fit a region, right? So let's just say we use this table and the manufacturer is building for a jurisdiction that their wind loads or their snow loads are 40 pounds per square foot, right? Well, maybe you didn't want to bump it up to the 50, but you're not necessarily 35. You're right in the middle there. Zone 5 will allow you to build to the 40-mile-an-hour winds. It's just going to be site specific for that location, right? But also, it can also be used where if you said, like, I'm not going to build a Zone 2 because it's just a little more costly to build a Zone 2 building, but I do want to have a larger range of Colorado to build for. You select that snow load that you're building to, and that's what will be posted on that insignia once it's been approved. And then basically that structure can go anywhere in the state of Colorado as long as it meets or exceeds that local's wind and snow and climatic conditions, right? So Zone 5 is more for anything that exceeds Zone 4 or if it's site specific, all right? But Zone 1, again, the minimum, and then you just do it in layers from there. So what I did is on the right side, you'll see that I actually used the 2016 SEAC doc. That seems to be a common document that a lot of locals use. We use it, especially in jurisdictions without building departments. We look up information on there for some site-specific data for that area to see what their ground snow loads are, and then we'll do the conversion to make sure that it matches the roof snow loads. And then, so this table and the future slides are using that document as reference. So it's not just, I didn't go to every single building department and look up their data. This is just a document that was referenced for this presentation here. So is there any questions about the table? No. Oh, just real quick, the wind loads, what I did is I looked at the IRC and the IBC, the maximum wind load speeds that are in there. I believe they're for the category 2 wind speeds. So what I did is I tried to divide them evenly amongst the four categories. So that's why it's 130, 150, 170, and 200. And I think I did 130 to try to cover more area of Colorado, just from experience looking at plan reviews. Most of the plans that come through are going to be at least 115, but there are going to be some a good portion of areas that are like 120, 125. So I started with 130 on that one. Okay, Dean.
Yeah, Donnie, having had the benefit of chatting with you about this previously as well, I mean, I think this is a very clever approach to solving the mapping problem that I think will always persist. But the devil will definitely be in the details, and particularly, like when you went through your analysis of the snow load, I think that's an excellent resource to help create a gradation across the state, and I think that gradation is pretty true to the mark. When I think about wind speeds, though, like a 200-mile-an-hour wind speed, I don't know that I've ever designed to that in 30 years of professional practice. So like that is a far more extreme value than a 95% or 95-pound snow load. So I'm just wondering if there is a similar wind speed resource that you have the way that you had a resource for the snow load to maybe better create a gradation there, because that ultimately it might be the wind speed that kicks everybody out, because nobody wants to design to a 200-mile-an-hour wind load just because they happen to be in Summit County or Telluride or one of our mountain communities that has the higher snow load but does not have the higher wind load.
I was going to comment the same thing. The wind speeds are too high in this table.
Yeah, so I guess to clarify, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that's a important part of this table, is that this table is not designed for you to go across the board, right? So if I decided I wanted to do a zone 1 roof load of 35 pounds, I don't have to do a zone 1 wind zone. So if I went to the most extreme zone 4 and still wanted to do a zone 1 wind, I still have that option, right?
I don't think zone 4 winds exist in Colorado. The 200-mile-per-hour is.
I think we go all up to like 100.
Puerto Rico.
70, I think. But these are like really high altitude.
Our wind speed in Summit County is 115, and it ain't gonna blow away when you got 50 pounds of snow on the roof either.
Yeah,
I think, but I do like that you created an extra zone, and you may look at creating a second zone in the Front Range where you have the microbursts and you do have those high spin wind load concerns in Boulder and the Front Range areas and the foothills there. You may be able to create two zones there, one zone that's out of those wind speed zones and one that's in them. But yeah, in Summit County, it's 115 is our snow load or our wind speed criteria up here. So it's very low. Yeah.
Okay. And then, yeah, so like I said, the table itself was just, hey, this is what I've gathered so far. And I try to stay consistent with the building code. So it can be adjusted, right? And I think what the consultant can do with us is help us, you know, really refine this table if this is something that was that we agreed that we can probably move forward with, or how it may need to be modified, or again, just start from scratch and throw out a different idea out there. But yeah, I think the table can be modified to fit.
The table's going to get more complicated too, because you're going to have wind and snow. You're going to have tables for each risk category.
Yeah, I think so. To address that situation, because I think I talked to Mark about this, was that, you know, the tables itself are going to be specific. I think to make it simple, make it specific to the category 2. Anything that exceeds that would just be a zone 5, right? So it'd be site specific. So the zones 1 through 4 would be category 2, and then if it's a situation where it exceeds category 2, then it would have to be site specific. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So this table, the way it's designed, it's not to be across the board. You can mix and match because you'll see in the other slides here that there's somewhat of a correlation the higher you go, but it's not exactly what you expect. So there are going to be jurisdictions that are in a lower elevation that have a higher wind speed, and then the higher you go, at least based on the search that I did, that it's actually lower than the lower elevation. So when we get to that, I'll get into those details.
I think Dean was next, and then Tim.
Yeah, so just follow-up question on that, Donnie, and I hadn't realized that we could go like a zone 2 snow, zone 1 wind, zone 3 climate zone. That definitely creates the sort of matrix of possibilities. I don't want to speak for any manufacturers if that simplifies what they're trying to do, but from a design standpoint, I'm kind of imagining then if it's not an across the board thing, when we submit a set of documents, is it going to be like, okay, this project is designed for, you know, 3.1.3 zone in Colorado, and the first 3 would be the snow, the second one, you know, like, is that how you're imagining we would define these things so that there's clarity on which zones we're talking about?
Yeah, so the idea is that, you know, currently the process is we have to look at the jurisdiction first before we design a structure, right? But the idea is with using a table and creating these zones is you are designing a structure to fit regions, right? Not a specific jurisdiction. So if you know that the regions cover a certain area of Colorado, you know, when you build that product, there's a higher chance of that building being accepted in that jurisdiction because they have that zone in their jurisdiction, right? And I'll get into a little more detail in the next slides because it kind of breaks down, because there's some jurisdictions that across the board, they're the same zone based on this table. And there's some jurisdictions like Boulder that they have 4 different zones, right? So you might not be able to put a zone 1 building in all of Boulder, but you know that zone 1 building will fit a good portion of Boulder, right? So again, we still have to consider the locals' most stringent design criteria for their wind, snow, climatic, fire suppression, all that other stuff that we have to consider, right? So we can't say like, well, we're going to approve zone 1, and since Boulder's has a zone 1, it's approved for all of Boulder. That's not going to really work that way, right? But we know that a zone 1 in Boulder can work. It just depends on what their, I guess, their local data shows what would be that 50-pound ground snow load or the 35-pound roof snow load, right? And so we'll get into the tables, and I'll show you a little bit more on that part. Okay, so the idea is to be able to give variety of design for the designers that are developing for Colorado, right? It's not going to be across the board, you have to do zone 1, across the board, you have to do zone 2. It gives you a variety. So there's not just, 10, 14, I guess, or I don't know how, my math is not working right now, but there's going to be a little more option there to expand the different kind of designs you can do for Colorado. Okay.
All right, Tim, did you have a question or a statement?
Yeah, Donnie just addressed some of my question. One thing I'd point out is when Broomfield went to the 21 IBC a couple years ago, it references for wind design, the ASCE 7-16 standard. And when we did that, we discovered that there was a problem with when they put that together, and the SEAC, Structural Engineer Association in Colorado, put a good white paper out, where for some unknown reason, the whole high wind, special wind region along the Front Range went away and the lines moved. So all of a sudden, Boulder County and Broomfield were out of the high wind, which was really weird. So, but that's gotten fixed in the ASCE 7-22, which is not enforced under the current IBC, but it's in the 2024. So I just wanted to point that out, is we found a good tool, ASCE 7. It's a hazard website that you can plug in like a particular address. And I'm not sure if you maybe looked at that, Donnie, when you were doing your research, at least from the 7-16, and how that would play with the different wind criteria zones. It might not be a big issue because I know we're trying to go down the path to try to get the most into a zone, but that was just my comment.
Yeah, and thanks for mentioning that, Tim. And I actually did. So you'll see in the later documents, what I did is, because if you look at the SEAC document, there's like 177 data points. And I went into the ASCE hazard tool and I put in all those locations to get wind specific information for the pinpoint that was in that SEAC document. And one of the things I also did was I actually made sure to click the little button for the snow loads as well, just to see if we can compare and see if how far off the ASCE is from the SEAC document. And for the most part, the most I ever seen increase was a 5-pound snow load. And I think the reason why is because when you put in the latitude and longitudinal information on that ASCE tool, it's off by within 100 feet. So it might have been just a little bit higher or something like that, and just said that it had a 5-pound per square foot heavier load. But for the most part, when using the 16 version, it's pretty consistent. It's just that the wind loads are where it gets a little confusing, because when you pull up the wind loads, it says that it's going to be not site specific, but it's going to be case study, right? And so the points that I have are based on what was pulled through the ASCE. And I think what we'll probably have to do is probably get the consultant to get jurisdictional specific information to make that a little bit more accurate. And that would actually help us out with maybe categorizing these wind zones a little bit better, right? And we can see what the most restrictive requirements are by locals, and maybe making that zone 4, how we ever make it, or something like that, right? However we want to divide that up. Is there any other questions on this one here?
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Just real quick too, using that same tool, a previous conversation that Tim and I had was what's being enforced in the 22 version of the ASCE. And that's probably going to cause some concern for the future, because that significantly increases the snow loads for those pinpoints. I've seen them on some of the ones that I looked through just to check. It increased it by 2 to 3 times the amount of the snow load that is on the SEAC document. So
just a minute, there's a new factor on the AC 722. So basically, when you put it into your load combinations now, just like we did with the wind conversion back in 2012, the factor on the snow load used to be 1, now it's 0.7.
Mhm.
Wind load factor used to be 1 or 1.6. Now it's 1, or I'm sorry, 1, now it's 0.6. So you do take 70% of those new values when you
Oh, okay.
compare them to the old ones.
But even then, if you had, let's say, I think the one I looked up, it had a 200 and something pound ground snow load, right? So even if you took 70% of that, that's still what, over 180?
It'd be
So
140.
yeah, so it's still a significant increase based on the amount that was in the table. So we just have to consider that when we're looking at that as well. Because I think
Yeah, I'm
in your
curious
case,
about that too. I haven't done too much looking in Colorado, but the couple locations that I have looked at, the snow load's actually gotten better in the Midwest.
oh, okay.
It's more like Virginia for some reason. Their snow loads went up a lot, and they're comparing apples to apples. Virginia snow loads are going up quite a bit,
Mhm.
but I think the mountainous regions, I think that this consensus was that the snow loads are actually going down a little bit.
Yeah, and I think Tim, didn't you have an increase in yours when you guys looked at your area?
Yeah, and you are correct. We've had for ever since I started working here 26 years ago, just a base 30-pound PSF, and we made the roof load match the ground load. And now trying to figure out what I'm going to do next spring when I go to the 24, we did a study of like all the quadrants in Broomfield, and it's an average of up to 50, which doesn't make any sense whatsoever because the biggest wet blizzard that we had was about 20 years ago. Brought down 2 buildings, and we analyzed that with 30 inches of wet snow, and it was right at 30 pounds per square foot. So I don't have any technical data from Broomfield to show why it went up.
Tim, did you consider that 0.7 factor that I talked about? Because if you take 50 times 0.7, you're at 35.
Yeah, I did not. So I'm going to have to relook at that. Thanks for that point when we start, because I'm trying to figure out how to do because I'm not going to do site-specific snow load. I'm going to take roughly the worst case. But thank you for that. I will look into that.
Yep.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. And then that's something else we could throw into this, right? What makes the most sense, the 16 version or the 22 version, right? So again, this is all custom, right? So we can do what fits meet the intent of the code, but also meets the needs of the industry to meet, I guess, site-specific information that the buildings would comply with. So at least accepted standards. Okay. All right, so I think we can go to the next slide. All right, so based on that table, what this is showing here is the way that was broken down by snow loads. This is just by snow loads because the wind zones are just a little more things that we had to look into. But based on the snow load data, all the pinpoints that were taken in that SEAC document, if we broke it up by the zones that I did, 51% of those pinpoints fit in zone 1, right? And 27 fit in zone 2, 12 for zone 3, 8 for zone 4, and 2% for zone 5. So if you look at the idea of the table itself, let's say I wanted to build a zone 1. Based on the data, we can say at least 51% of that information, we know that there's a zone 1 in that area, right? And so let's just say the majority of that jurisdiction is a zone 1. That's great. It's not always going to be the case, but that would be great. But let's say I wanted to design the building to a zone 2 snow load. Well, zone 2 will exceed zone 1. So in reality, based on the information, you would be able to possibly cover 78% of the state if you did design the structure to a zone 2, right? Or again, you could just go to zone 1 and still cover at least 51% of the state, depending on how much coverage that jurisdiction has for that specific zone, right? Or if you wanted to build to the most extreme, zone 5 either site specific or anything over that 94 mile hour or 94 PSF roof snow load, you should be able to cover, about 100% of the state. I'm not sure how much locations are going to be over a zone 4 other than 3 that are on the SEAC document, but those are like up in the peaks areas. So I'm not sure where else in Colorado are going to be up that high, but this just gives you a general idea of like, hey, this is what the data shows from that document if we broke it up into categories into different groups. And I also did a little test to see what it would happen if I just bumped it up an extra 5 pounds. So zone 1, I went to a 40-pound roof snow load, and it actually covers, I think it's 62% of the state. Although it's a small increase, it might actually be a higher impact on the cost. So it's just testing it out, but we can, if we play with those numbers to be something that is reasonable, both cost and meeting the intent of the regional building codes, maybe it's something that we can consider as well. And that's the only zone that I think I altered was just zone 1, because I think increasing zone 2, 3, 4, it would make things a little more difficult. But yeah. And then, did you have something, Justin?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So are we considering elevation in any of these?
Yeah, so that'll go into the next part.
Okay.
Okay. Well, actually not the next slide, but it's on one of the slides. I did put it on there.
Okay.
All right. So when you look at the data and you get all that information where all those pinpoints were put on that SEAC document, what I did is I said, all right, well, if we looked at this as if a layered cake, right? We had zone 1 was the first layer, zone 2, second layer, zone 3, third layer, and so on, right? If we had all those pinpoints that were within a zone 1 by county wise, so I'm not saying that entire county is a zone 1, but I'm saying that there's a zone 1 layer in that county that it covers 81% of the state, right? Or 81% of the county's coverage, or 81% of the counties that are in Colorado. There's a zone 1 layer in that county, okay? And then zone 2, you go to the second layer, so it's more like a overlay, right? Zone 2, if you look at all that data, 34% of the counties in Colorado have a zone 2. And then zone 3, 22% of the counties in Colorado have a zone 3, and then so forth, right? So that's what this table showing, or this pie chart in the table, right? Is just saying like, hey, if you broke it up into layers, there's a zone 1 in 81% of the counties in Colorado, okay? Does that make sense to everybody? Or is there any questions on that one? No? Okay. Can you go to the next slide, Sam? All right, so this slide here is just a snip of the table that I created. So basically I took all that information that's off the SEAC document and I put it into an Excel and then organized it in a way so that I can look at what the zones that I put on that table. And then on the left side, so you'll see zones, anything that had a ground snow load or a roof snow load that was equal to or less than that SEAC document, I label it as zone 1. So you'll see that I think zone 1's a 50-pound snow load. So for Adams County, you can see that all of Adams County is a zone 1 because it's 40 or less on the ground snow load. And then just from experience, I know that their roof snow load requirements is a 30 pounds. So it looks like they kind of just rounded up from 28 to 30 for their entire county and just said that's their roof load. That might be the same case for some other jurisdictions where it's just below a certain amount and they said, let's just round it up. We would have to do a little more searching on that, but at least in this case, you can kind of see that's kind of what they did, right? At least that's what I'm assuming.
The ground snow and the flat roof snow is 0.7.
Yeah, I did there's a equation that it's on my document that I used for that.
Yeah, the AC7 equation for calculating roof snow load from ground snow load, it's 0.7 times the ground snow load and then a bunch of factors.
Yeah,
I think
all the
factors are 1.
Yeah, so I think that's the the PE and the FE, which is partially exposed and full exposed. I think that factor is slightly different between those two.
Yeah,
So
so
it
that
changed.
other factor should just be a factor of 1 to 0.9.
Yeah, so this is what was calculated on there, at least for those two columns, right? But if we just use the ground snow load at 50 or below, it fits the zone 1 category. Okay. All right, so in this, so you'll see that there's the zones. I just marked it zone 1 because it was equal to or less than the zone 1 category on that table. You'll see that this is all for Adams County. It gives the pinpoints of where those tests were done, and also has the altitude here. The ground snow load, flat roof for partially exposed, and then flat roof for fully exposed. And then I added this table. It's not in the SEAC document, but what I did is I said, all right, well, I have data here for pinpoints of where these test points were at. Let's just see what the ASCE hazard tool pulls for that location to see what kind of information is there. And you can see that the ASCE says that it's 107 for all of Adams County for those pinpoints, but Adams County is 115 for the minimum design criteria. So I'm not sure why they increased it. But and it's not in a special wind zone, but that's just how they did their design criteria. But the ASCE hazard tool marks it as a 107, at least for that specific data point. All right. Is there any questions about this table?
I got a comment on your wind speed 107 to 115. That's been a problem in Colorado that I've thought that we've had for a while, is when we switch from the 115 to the lower wind speeds, most jurisdictions thought, well, we don't want to lower our wind speed, so we're not going to lower our wind speed. So they just left it at 115, not realizing that even at 107 mile per hour, their roof uplift pressures are greater than the 115 mile per hour of the previous code. So they're double hurting themselves in the roof.
Yeah, and that's going to be the hard part about the wind speed is that just looking at this table, there's probably going to be a lot of jurisdictions. Well, there is going to be a lot of jurisdictions based on the ASCE hazard tool that the tool pulls up a way lesser value than the locals, right? I think the highest the data that I pulled was 110 mile an hour, and that was down I think southeast or something like that. So the problem that we're going to run into is, justifying dropping that wind load if the locals wind load is higher, right? If the intent is to take into consideration the locals design criteria and their design criteria for that wind speed is higher, the questions that we're going to have to ask is, why is it higher? Because this is what it shows on this tool. But that's the thing, is it's just a tool that's used for reference, and there might be site-specific information that the locals have on why they went with a higher wind load speed. So it's a little bit difficult, and we'll get into that a little bit further down in the slides as well. But that was something that I noticed as well.
Yeah, and Donna, I think this is where the consultants can be helpful to have those conversations with the locals about how they arrived there. Because at Justin's point, some of them may just not be understanding that there's an opportunity here to switch to something that actually better reflects what's going on in their jurisdiction if they don't have data to support, what they currently are requiring to do these code changes.
Yeah, and yeah, that's why I said that those are the questions that we're going to have. Like, why did you select that part in there? Because even if you look at the ASCE data or the ASCE tool itself, and you do an overlay of Colorado, I think it says 110, except to the point where it gets into the case study areas of Colorado. So even to that point, the overlay is higher than what it shows here. So it really, the site specific information is a little more pinpoint information, I guess.
Yes, your northeast corner of the state in the Nebraska corner is going to be your highest wind speed.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions on this? The basic layout of this table? No? Okay. Well, let's go to the next example. So in this example, this is actually Boulder, the county of Boulder, not the city of Boulder, but the county of Boulder. And so same idea of how the tables or the columns are broken up, same information, but you'll see in the zones, based on the zone chart that was created, that it goes from zone 1 through 4, right? So, and actually, when I looked up the town of Boulder, they are consistent with the table. They have, I think it's a, I think it was a 40-pound ground snow load for the town of Boulder, if not 35. But the county of Boulder, if you look at their map, their snow load map, they actually go up to, I believe, 130 ground snow load. So there's going to be some a little bit of inconsistencies with the SEAC document and local data. I'm not sure why they went up to 130 on one of their layers or part of their elevation. They might have some case study information that it's not really open to the public, but it's something that they've done in the past and why they felt that they needed to have another higher ground snow load for their area. But they do go to 130. So in that type of situation, based on the table, if you did design to a zone 4, you can install that home in zone 4 or less, right? But if it was to go into that location where they had that 130-pound ground snow load area, it would have to be a zone 5 site-specific home, right? And I'm not sure what's in that area. There might not even be a lot of construction going on in that area. So chances are there's probably not a lot of development happening and the product may never go there. But there's always a chance, right? But there's also the alternative in the table for a zone 5 site-specific, okay? And then same thing on the right side there, you'll see that the wind loads slightly change, but the maximum is still 107 VOLT per the ASCE, and some of those are the special wind zone areas. I think that were showed up on the ASCE hazard tool. So it just says check with the locals conditions. So although it gives you some data here, it still refers you to the locals and their wind speeds. Okay. And then again, just to reiterate, the ground snow loads, for the most part, were consistent across the board for these. If there was any deviation, it was at the most 5 pounds per square foot for the ground snow loads. All right. Any questions on this table? No? Okay. Next. All right. So this is this slide and the next few are more visuals of that information I was talking about. We're talking about the percentage of coverage. So based on all the data that was collected in that SEAC document, these counties are the counties that had a zone 1 layer. Now you'll see that there's a purple area there. So there's no pinpoints that were in that document, but just a quick Google search for those locations, they're all 35 pound or less. So I included it in the zone 1 area and that the percentage of coverage. So I just wanted to highlight that you know, the SEAC document doesn't necessarily cover those areas, but based on some searches, those are still in the zone 1 based on that table. Okay. The areas that are white do not have a zone 1 I guess layer within that county. All right. But you'll see that zone 1 covers a good portion of Colorado. I'm not saying that all of those jurisdictions have and will only have a zone 1, but there is a zone 1 layer in those jurisdictions. Okay. Does that make sense to everybody? Or any questions before we move on to the next one? No? Okay. Can you go to the next one? All right. So now in this one, same concept. All the data that was pulled from that SEAC document within those counties. This shows that those counties have a zone 2, right? And you'll see if you go back real quick and take a mental note of this map here, you'll see that some of those zone 2s overlap zone 1s. So that's why I said you have to look at this like a layered cake, right? Your first layer is a zone 1 and the second layer is zone 2. So some of these counties may have multiple zones, but you know, if you design a structure to a zone 1, there's a high probability that that structure can go into that jurisdiction. And if it has multiple layers, then you can design to the highest layer, or you just design to maybe a mid-range layer, and it'll be good up to that mid layer down, because it would exceed the zone 1 requirements, right? So if you design to a zone 2, can you go to the next slide? So you see that El Paso has a zone 1 and a zone 2. So if I design to a zone 2 category, I know that I can install that structure in anywhere that's a zone 2 snow zone for El Paso and below, right? So that's the idea, is to look at it more in layers instead of as a county as a whole, because as you know, depending on where you go, some of these jurisdictions may have different snow loads in their jurisdiction depending on elevation. Okay. All right. Any questions on the zone 2? Go ahead and go to zone 3. All right, zone 3. So again, all this is just showing that based on that information, all those data points, these counties have a zone 3. All right, go to the next one. And then zone 4, again, based on that information, these are the counties that have a zone 4 area, a zone 4 layer in their jurisdiction. And then go to the last one. And then these are the only 3 jurisdictions that showed up as a zone 5, which exceeded the zone 4. So these were anything that was above a 94 PSF roof snow load. Okay. But the idea, again, remember zone 5 is anything that exceeds zone 4, but also gives you the ability to do a site specific. This is more just a visual of the data that I pulled from that SEAC document. So it's not saying like you can only do zone 5 for these areas. This is just showing that only these 3 areas have a zone 5, anything that exceeded the zone 4 in that table. Okay. Does that make sense to everybody? Or any questions? No? Okay, go ahead and go to the next slide. All right, so this is a heat map. So I took all those data points that were in that SEAC document, and I had somebody help us out on our DOLA team that specializes in making these maps here for us. And so I took all those coordinates and I tried to create a heat map, and it's not the best heat map just because there's a lot of information in these areas, but there you'll see like Burlington, north of Burlington, South Burlington, there's no data points there, right? But you can kind of see how the heat map and those 5 county maps that I showed you, how they kind of correlate, right? You'll see in the darker areas, that is the maximum ground snow loads that were recorded in on the SEAC document. And it's not just that one specific point, you know, snow falls outside that point, right? So it's probably going to fade down outside that, but you'll see that the majority of Colorado has that lighter colored blue, which is the zone 1. And then the darkest colored blue is going to be zone 5. So you'll see that those 3 counties that we showed kind of correlate with where the heat map shows the highest snow loads are going to be for those zone 5. And then like Colorado Springs, I believe those were just a zone 4. So it's not as dark as the points that are just to the top left of the OL in Colorado. And then down at the bottom there near Telluride, you'll see there's another darker colored blue there. So I tried my best. That it's not the best tool, but it kind of gives a good representation of, you know, how things kind of fade out from those points from a zone 5 to a zone 1, right? So hopefully this is a little bit helpful heat map. I wanted to include it in there because it gives a little more better visual of that layer system, or the cake layers that I've been talking about. But it's not going to be all of that county, but some of those counties will have multiple layers to that that ground snow load design criteria. Okay. Any questions on this? No? Okay, go to the next slide. Tim, can you go to the next slide?
Or it could be my internet. I just got to know that my internet is not stable. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think it was because I seen your head jerked like that. Okay, so this table that I have here is just a dot chart, right? Let's take the colors out of the equation real quick, just so you have a better idea of what this is, right? So what I did is I grabbed all that information, and again, this is taking information from the ground snow loads and the altitude that was reported for that pinpoint, right? And so if you look just at the points themselves, you can see there is a trend there, right? It goes, the higher you go, the higher the snow load, right? But now if we take the colors into consideration, the colors themselves are actually different zones. And so you actually see that between 6,000 feet and 10,000 feet, there's a huge area there of different zones. It's not, there's no trend there really. The higher you go, the higher the snow load for those areas of Colorado. And actually, if you look at that one that's at 10,000 feet, you'll see that it's a zone 1, that light color blue. I believe that's Park County, and I think it's a 30-pound snow load, or a 35-pound snow load, whatever there it is. But it puts them in the zone 1 area. But you'll see that it's at 10,000 feet, and just above it, you have zone 5s that are at 10,000 feet. But prior to that, anything between 6,000 and 6,000 to 10,000, there's a big cluster of different zones in there, right? So to me, if we were to try to create a table based on altitude or elevation, it wouldn't exactly work out, because there's going to be so many jurisdictions that are going to be in those mid ranges that might actually have to comply with the higher snow load or wind load possibly, and they're actually have a lower snow load. So we don't want to exceed the locals. At least the intent is not to greatly exceed them, right? There might be a slight higher requirement if we did this table, but we don't want to create a situation where they're like 15, 20, 30 pounds more, or I guess overly designed for that area, right? So hopefully this makes sense to you guys. And I think, Justin, you might have a comment because I seen you unmute yourself there.
Yeah, I was wondering, have you contacted SEAC about any of this? Are they giving you any guidance, or is this just all stuff you've been thinking on your own?
This is the stuff that I've been thinking on my own. I missed one of their meetings that they just had not too long ago. I think I had a training that I had to go to. I know that they're working on a new wind case study, but I'm not sure what they're doing for snow loads on their documents.
Okay. I was wondering, like, if you went to them and said, "Hey, we're trying to break up the state into regions." I did
start that conversation with them, and that's why I was invited to the meeting. I just couldn't make it to that meeting. But I talked to one of their reps that they have in Denver, the city and county of Denver. I forget, I think it's David Wren or something like that. And he's the one that introduced me to one of the SEAC members, and they invited me to the meeting. Unfortunately, I just couldn't make it. But yeah, I had at least started to plant that seed. I just haven't been able to actually sit down with them and go through this, but hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, and are we going back to wind at any point, or are we focusing on snow?
The next slide will be wind.
Okay.
But
I'll wait.
At least to this point, does everybody understand that there is a trend in the altitude when you look at the table, or at least the data? But you'll see that there's a large portion of that data that shows that there's overlapping ground snow loads. Yeah, okay. All right, so this next slide that's here. So same thing, let's take the colors out of this, right? So in this situation, we're looking at the wind speed and the altitude, but this is specific to the information that I got off of the ASM or the ASCE hazard tool. Okay. So if you look at it, there is somewhat of a trend, right? It's not, I wouldn't say it's a significant trend, like, oh yeah, we should base everything on this, because at 4,000 feet of altitude, you'll see that they're in zone 1 areas, right? That have the highest wind speeds. But when you go higher in elevation, it actually drops down, and it's a little more consistent with 105 to 107. Right. And so based on that tool, it looks like the higher you go, the less the wind speed, right? But that's not always going to be the case, especially with local specific information that they may have. It just doesn't make that much sense. But when we bring in the colors, what it's just saying is that, or what it's showing, it still goes back to the ground snow load colors, but it's just saying that at that altitude, although the wind speed's that specific speed, it fits that ground snow load zone, right? So there might, you'll see like between 6,000 feet of altitude to 10,000 feet of altitude, there's going to be a mixture of ground snow loads in there, right? So it'd be hard for us to develop a regional building code using altitude, at least using the ASCE hazard tool, because you're going to have so many different variations of ground snow loads that it might not make sense to enforce a higher wind speed for higher elevations or a lower wind speed for lower elevations, because it just doesn't work out that way when you look at the data, right? So that's why I included this table here to kind of just really showcase that if we went an altitude route to make these zones, it's not necessarily going to work out, in the sense that the goal is to minimize the amount of variations for the zones. And if we went the altitude route, we would actually increase that, because we would have to create so many different zones for the altitude that because you're going to have so many different variations of ground snow loads for those locations, right? You might have a high altitude with a low ground or low ground snow load, and possibly a low or high wind speed, right? So it makes things a little more complicated, at least from what I can find using the information from the SEAC document and the ASCE hazard tool. I didn't look at all pinpoints for the new ASCE 22 version, so I'm not sure what that information looks like. It might be a little bit better. It might be worse. I'm not sure. But just looking at the information and then comparing it to how the table's broken down, it just doesn't look like it's going to work out that way. Maybe if we get more site-specific data from the locals of what their wind speeds are, this table will probably show a better trend, right? Maybe the higher you do go, the higher the wind speed's going to be, or maybe it's going to be somewhat consistent with this, right? And maybe it's only going to be the ones that are at the peaks that have the highest wind speeds. It's a little bit hard to say, at least right now, with the wind loads, because the wind loads themselves using that tool, it's only like a 4 or 5 mile an hour difference throughout the state using those pinpoints. All right, and then Justin, do you have something specific on the altitude part?
Not the altitude part. I know we talked about the wind speeds and why some jurisdictions use higher values.
Mm-hmm.
Did you look at the SEAC wind contour maps that they had?
I did look at them in the past, and from my understanding, those are just for those. Those are going to be. They have maps on there that are for the Front Range area.
Yes.
Again,
that would be the only special condition that I would be aware of in the state. So that would be the only location where I would expect the jurisdictions to dictate a higher wind speed than what the IBC was giving.
Yeah, and so I can see that. I think the only thing is it just, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but that's only covering half of the ranges in Colorado. It's not covering the western slopes, right? So it's using that data might be maybe a little more specific to the eastern parts of the mountains, but the information on the western slopes would be a little bit harder to find. But at the end of the day, I think to get, I guess, more accurate information, gathering or having the consultant gather that information from the locals of what their wind speeds are would be better, just because, again, the tool itself, the ASCE hazard tool, says like, hey, this is what we came up with, but still check with the locals. So that's always going to be something that can be followed back on. Is like, well, that's just a tool. This is what our information shows, and this is why we went with this.
And that's why the ASCE 7 hazard doesn't, the 2016 version doesn't have the Colorado special wind speeds, but I guess ASCE has been working with SEAC for the 2022. So the wind speeds from SEAC will be introduced into the 722.
Yeah, and so one of the things that we can consider too is, because we don't know when they're going to be done with that, right? We have to get this in place by July 1st. And so if we have the consultant gather that information from the locals now, we'll have site-specific information, right? And then down the road, let's just say that the SEAC and ASC doesn't finish their study until next year or the following year, or how long it takes. That's something we can consider in the future. Maybe like, hey, the jurisdiction has 104-mile-an-hour winds, but based on that new study, it's only like 125 or 124, right? We can consider that down the road. I don't want to wait on SEAC to develop that table or that new information to I guess develop the wind zones. And I think that the consultant would probably get faster information by just reaching out to the locals and getting their site specific. Because you got to remember, we still have to meet or exceed the locals' design criteria for that location, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it has to it can't be less stringent than what the locals are enforcing at that location, for at least for that category.
And the altitude, you also get a factor, a reduction factor, the higher you go. The air becomes less dense, so it has less force behind it when it blows. So that's the other factor. As you're going up the altitude, your wind pressure is actually going down because the air is less dense. You still have the same wind speed, but you're blowing different medium. Denser air versus less dense air.
Yeah. Again, like I said, that I think I actually tried to look into how long it would take to get data points for every mile across Colorado, and there's thousands of points that you would have to search up on the ASC data tool. But if we did it maybe every 10 or 100 miles, we might be able to shorten up that table. It would just be a big overhaul of a bunch of individuals looking up that information on the ASCE tool. I think we might be able to create a better heat map, but that's a lot of work.
And this might be something we need to talk about too, as far as what's listed on design documents, because this elevation factor that I'm talking about for the wind pressure, it's the variables called KE, and a lot of people don't list that on their design documents. So it's confusing because I'll do a project where, let's say I do it for 120 mile per hour or 115 mile per hour, and they're 2,000 feet up in the air above sea level. So, it has the same wind speed as a place on California's coast, right? But the wind pressure on California's coast is going to be greater than the same wind speed 2,000 feet above elevation. So just to list 115 mile per hour on your drawing doesn't provide you enough information, because that wind pressure has been reduced inland versus coastal. So that KE needs to be on the construction documents, because people need to know if that wind pressure has been reduced for elevation.
Okay, but that reduction is more to meet the site specific, not necessarily that they can't.
That is correct. This is a site specific thing that we're discussing, but at the same time, it should be part, regardless of whether it's site specific or not, the KE value should be a thing that's starting to go on design documents.
Yeah, so I guess my question to you would be, it'd be a over-engineered if they design it to the coastal KE versus Colorado KE.
Right, you're allowed to assume the KE of 1.
Yeah, so
you don't have to consider the altitude if you don't want to.
So I guess if a designer wanted to reduce it, they can do the site specific, but it doesn't hurt them if they did coastal.
Right. Right, but you don't want to do a 200 mile per hour per year table and not reduce it.
Yeah, and I guess in those situations, we would just have those conversations with them, like, why does it look lower than usual? Then they can say, oh, we use the factor that's here for Colorado. Typical factor for coastal is 1. We reduced it, which we're allowed to per engineered practices. for this location.
In my mind, that creates a problem too in the future for relocating these buildings. So if you got on your data plate that this building has been designed for 115 mile per hour, but you used a large, it used a large reduction factor for elevation, and now you're moving it to somewhere lower, it's not been designed for those wind pressures. But there's nothing on the data plate that says, hey, we designed it for this pressure, not this wind speed.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
you're going to
I
have
can
problems
understand.
relocating buildings that were designed using the elevation factor when they go to lower elevations.
Mhm. I'll have to look. Is there a table in the IRC or ABC that specifically says for Colorado region this is a factor that you use?
No, it's all dependent on the elevation in feet. So it's an equation. It changes by the foot elevation.
And that's in the engineer's handbook type
Yeah,
of
that's in the
equation?
AC 722 or 716.
All right.
So Donnie, I want to give us a time check. We've got about 15 minutes left.
Okay. I think this is the last table for me, right?
Yep, I think so.
Okay.
Any other discussion on these tables? Justin, we sure appreciate your input on this. Thank you.
No problem.
And you just earned yourself a permanent seat. I'm not looking for any replacements, Justin, so. All right, that is kind of the wrap up of what Donnie was talking about. Any other questions for Donnie or I'm just going to go back and just throw this one chart out again. So again, not a proposal. We're going to let the code consultants work through this with us, but just an idea and on some ways that we might take care of this issue, right? Any other discussion on this? Any other specific questions for Donnie?
Well, I would throw out there, Sam, too, that now that folks have seen something presented, and Donnie, great job working this up. Obviously very complicated and there's no magic bullet to this, right? But now that folks see this and have a chance to think about it, if you guys have any thoughts on how to better thread the needle while we're getting the consultant up and running, please send those great thoughts and ideas to Donnie and Sam.
Yeah, Mo, that's a good point. The advantage of this technical advisory committee is that we are representing a lot of different stakeholders. Would love to hear from the manufacturers on how they see this. Dean, you had some great input from the design standpoint. Manufacturers may have input on the cost impacts. And of course, Justin, your expertise as the structural engineer and different ways to, and different tables and different tools and equations to use are also.
Can I share my screen for a minute?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me stop sharing.
I just wanted to, I installed the KMZ file from SEAC a while ago, so I have the contours graphically on Google Maps.
Justin, all eyes, here you go. There you go.
Which screen am I on?
You had a green screen up before, and I wasn't sure.
Can you see the map now?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, so these are the contours, and like I said, Colorado has put out. I
They
can't
just went
expand
away.
this,
Yeah.
but if you click on the name, so these are different frequencies of what the wind speed is expected. So in a 10-year frequency, they're expecting the wind pressures or the wind speeds to be this. So there's different contours for different time periods. So this is a once in every 1700 year occurrence. So these are the wind speeds that SEAC put out, and these are the contours, how much of the state the SEAC document has. Donnie, to your point, you said that on the western side there's no contours, but I wouldn't expect there to be any because your climate flows going west to east, right? I wouldn't expect special wind on this side of the mountain range. But these are the contours. So these are the special wind. These should be the only special winds that the locals have, unless they've got a good reason not to. And the only reason that these are higher is because the straight line winds from the range itself. I mean, you got wind falling down this mountain. So, you know, you would think that only in this area you would have the special wind. And if you go to the hazards tool, you can see the shaded area is the special wind. This is where they don't give you a wind speed and they tell you that you have to look it up. And all along here, this is that 110 mile per hour contour you're talking about, Donnie. So up here is where your highest wind speed is, closest to this 114 mile per hour. So again, anything in this area over here, I would expect special wind, but nothing from the rest of the state outside of this contour here. And from what I read on SEAC's website, these contours right here are what has been implemented in the ASC 722. So now ASC 722, the hazard tool, if you go to the 722 version, Tim, I was doing Broomfield for you. So you'll see that, yeah, it gives you 137 mile per hour now, which should be the interpolation between, where's Broomfield on this map? It should be the interpolation between, you know, these contours. So the tool is now interpolating between these contours that SEAC has provided in the AC 722.
Justin, can you do me a favor? Can you click on that details just so that everybody understands what we're saying when it says the special wind? So it just in that details section, it explains to you that, you know, this is where it explains to you that to check in with the locals on their conditions right here. The authority having jurisdiction shall, if necessary, adjust the values given. Right. So again, this is just a tool. It's you know, well, there are jurisdictions that rely on this tool or that wind map that Justin was showing, but they might have, you know, site-specific information that they're enforcing, and that's what makes it difficult using this tool or other things. And that's why I think it's important to have the consultant possibly just reach out to all the locals and see what their site-specific information is.
And these values, right, the 50-year MRI, that is your VASD. That's your design wind speed. This is the speed that you use before you factor it by 0.6. So once you get your wind pressure based off of this number and you multiply it by 0.6, it's the same thing as basically the wind pressure from this wind speed. So
Tim, you got your hand up?
Yes, thank you. I'm just curious if this, I know that 722 is not going to be technically enforceable until the 24 IBC gets adopted. And currently the state's under the 21. And I know using updated standards sometimes is acceptable. I've looked at that, you know, from a jurisdictional standpoint. But normally I would have to do that with an amendment. I'm just wanting to make sure using the 722 tools or any of the data is going to work through the state, since I believe, you know, it's the 76, well, it's not, I don't believe the 21 IBC. So I just want to point that out if there's some technical process as we're moving down with this. You know, I'd fully support going with the 722, but just to make sure, does that take any kind of a technical amendment or official policy? Just a question and a comment. Thanks.
The AC 722 is going to be adopted by the 2024 IBC. So once the state adopts the IBC, the 722 will be adopted by adoption. So there won't be any technical document needed. It'll just be adopted by the building code.
Correct. But currently the Division of Housing is under the 21, and I'm not sure you guys are talking about the 24 for a few more years. Is that-
No, I think we're the only reason we're talking about the 2024 is because the 2024, the tool takes into account the contours from SEAC in the 722, but
I
it
agree.
wasn't taking it in the 716. So if you want to know what the wind speed is per SEAC, you're going to have to choose 722 just to get the wind speed. You're not going to design per 722. You're just going to get the wind speed.
And just real quick, Tim, the other thing to clarify what I said earlier is if there's other standards like this 22 that might benefit this regional building code design that we're trying to do better, then there's a possibility that we could adopt sections just like we did with the tiny homes, right? We adopted the 21 version of the tiny house provisions in lieu of the 2018, and so there's always that possibility. I'm not saying that that's what we're considering. It's just if you know more information, it might be helpful.
I would already tell you that I'm not a fan of mixing and matching. Florida's done that. They're on the 2021 IBC, but they've adopted the ASC 722 as one of their amendments. So it's a weird state. You know, as an engineer, as a modular engineer, I always correlate the IBC to the ASCE. If I'm working with 2021, it's ASC 716. Well, when start saying, okay, we're going to take the 2021, but we're going to adopt the newer ASCE, now it just gets a whole lot more confusing for me.
So,
And that's a great point. I agree that from a legal standpoint, adoption standpoint, like Broomfield, I'm under the 21, so I would be able to only use a design coming in using the 7-22. If an engineer came in and requested to use an alternate method of design through that process. I just wanted to point out as this thing moves forward from a legal adoption standpoint that the state's in good shape, Division of Housing, you know, either through an amendment, and I agree with you, Justin. So I just wanted to bring that forward. I know you're not making any decisions here, but if you're going to be utilizing the 722 data, I think from another standpoint, do you have to do that through a rule change or a code adoption?
right. So good points all. We've got 5 minutes left. I just want to wrap this up. We will continue to discuss the regional codes in the October 8th meeting, along with the other things that we have talked about. Justin, if I could get you to stop sharing for just a second, I'll go back to sharing my slide.
I gotta find my thing. There it is.
We'll wrap this thing up. Actually, I don't even need to go back to my slide. I will. Hang on just a second. For those of you that are going to the Offsite Construction Summit tomorrow, we will see you there. Any follow, and we're going to have a pretty good team there. We're actually presenting, Donnie and Megan and myself are presenting. Heather will be there. We'll have a couple other staff folks there. We're looking forward to it. We always like this meeting. It's a great chance to look at, meet some of our manufacturers, meet some of the vendors that are out there, and reconnect with the Modular Building Institute folk team also. So we will be there tomorrow. Most of us will be there all day. Some folks may be maybe headed out a little early for other meetings, but look forward to the October 8th meeting. Donnie, like Tim said, great job on doing their background and the research on some of this. And everybody, I appreciate everybody's participation. Are there any other questions for me before we shut this thing down? All right, fantastic. You guys have a great day. And if you have anything wakes you up in the middle of the night, don't call me, but email me. Any thoughts on where we're headed with this? Thank you very much.
Thanks. See you tomorrow.
Sounds good. Yeah. See you guys tomorrow.
Take care, everyone.